The carriage was not moving. Along the road hobbled an old man on a crutch, with a pack on his back. "Good morning. Take a Jew along with you into town?" The passengers made room for him in the carriage. Someone asked him, "Are you from Kotsk?" "Almost," replied the old man, smiling. "That is to say, I was born in Praga, but I've been living in Kotsk for 40 years. "How old are you, grandfather?" asked a young man, tugging at his sleeve. "Is it important for you to know?" asked the old man in an offended tone. Then his voice became softer. "I'll tell you, I don't know myself. I served under Berek before Praga. I was 16 at the time, and that is a while since. It was in 1790. Well, figure it out for yourself." The old man smiled, showing his 2 sole remaining teeth, which looked like a pair of shovels. "Then you're almost 80, cried another. "That's a bad guess, uncle," said the old man, smiling again. "I'm older than that." "Of course you are," interjected Samuel. "He is more than 80. "The young man is right," said the old man, nodding. "On the first day of Pentecost I became 81. The horses had reached the high road, tugged hard at the carriage, and bore it forward with a merry clatter. The carriage creaked, the ungreased axles ground with a scraping squeak that set the teeth on edge. Mordecai looked admiringly at the Jew who had taken part in the Battle of Praga, and felt somehow related to him. He edged closer to the old man, and was at a loss, out of sheer embarrassment, what to ask him first. More than once Mordecai had heard his father tell that their relative, Shmuel Zbitkover, in those days had paid a Cossack a silver ruble for a dead Jew, and a 5-ruble gold piece for a living one. "Did you really serve under Berek Yoselovich?" asked a Chassid, who all this time had been lying upon his bundle, and now suddenly sat up, rubbing his eyes. "With the same fellow who lies buried just outside of Kotsk?" "Yes, the very same," answered the old man, taking out a horn snuff-box, inhaling a generous pinch, making a wry face, sneezing into his beard, and passing the snuff-box to his companions. "The very same. I served under Berek Yoselovich." "And there was really a slaughter, eh?" asked a Chassid as he polished his velvet cap. "They say it was fearful. In fact, they say that the whole Jewish regiment was wiped out." "True, true," said the old man, pointing to his crutch. "That's where I lost my foot." "So indeed. Ah!" exclaimed several Hasidim, looking at the crutch as if now it had a deeper meaning. The old man mused a while, then sighed. "Ah, that was years ago. Years ago." "And was he really, Berek," asked the Hasid with the velvet cap again, "such a great general? Then he must have had brains. Army strategy, that's no trifle. That's a difficult subject." "He was an infidel," offered somebody. "He publicly desecrated the Sabbath." "You're unworthy of pronouncing his name," raged the old man. "Who are you, anyway? Better worry about your own sins." "He waged battle on the very Day of Atonement," said another Hasid. "So he did," retorted the old man, almost raising his crutch in anger, as if squaring off for a set to with the Hasid. "But Reb Meir permitted it. If you don't know what you're talking about, keep your mouth shut." "No quarreling, no quarreling," admonished Samuel, calming the old man. "Who's quarreling?" yelled the octogenarian in a voice louder than ever. "I detest it when a man opens his mouth and doesn't know what he's talking about." Mordecai brought forth a flask of sweet brandy and offered it to the old man, who in one swallow drained it of more than half its contents. Now he was warmed up and felt more lively. "How did he talk with you? Berek, I mean. In Yiddish?" asked Mordecai. "What a question! How, then? Yiddish, of course," answered the old man, smiling. "I remember it as clearly as if I saw him before me now. There he sat on his white steed, looking like an emperor, and he had a pair of mustaches that was the envy of more than one Pole. Without exaggeration, those mustaches reached to his shoulders." "Were there elderly Jews in the regiment, too?" asked Mordecai. "Elderly?" The old Jew closed his eyes, thought for a while, as if he hadn't quite understood the question. "There were few older men, mostly youngsters. But our regiment was as good as the best of them. Even the Uhlans gave way and couldn't stand up against the enemy's fire, while we Jews lay for more than a month in the old cemetery behind the breastworks and let the Russians smell our powder. We didn't allow them to advance, and if we'd had got reinforcements that time, even a single regiment," the old man's voice was softer now, as if he were telling a secret, "Warsaw would have remained in our hands. We didn't leave the trenches, even on Yom Kippur. Reb Meyer absolved us. I remember clearly that after Kol Nidre the sky was full of stars. It was a bright night. Yes, the stars were thick as chickenpox. None of us closed an eye. We sat in groups around small fires, chatted, discussed Jewish learning, and expected any moment that the enemy would storm our redoubts. Berek was with us too, going from one group to another, with a pleasant word for everyone, a joke, and wherever he appeared things got livelier. I tell you, he was a gem of a fellow. Where was I now? Yes, the enemy was sure that Jews would not battle on Yom Kippur, so he began his attack at daybreak. Well, children, how can I describe the scene? The air was aflame. It rained fire. But we weren't silent either. Every time the enemy came rushing at us from out of the woods, it looked as if the woods themselves were on the move. It was an awful sight to see. And as the enemy approached our position, our cannons mowed them down like grass under a scythe. This kept up till the day was well advanced, and Berek ran from one redoubt to the other. That morning 3 horses were shot under him, and every time he shouted, "Fire!" the cannons replied with such a thunderous din that our very eardrums quivered. The enemy drew nearer. The wooden houses of the Jews caught fire. So there we were, fire behind us, fire in front of us. But we stood there as one man until the very last minute, and when the enemy came pouring into the trenches, we did not retreat. We fought over every inch of soil, and blood flowed like water. Do you understand? There were 10 Russians to every Jew. They came swarming out of the forest like locusts. And now Berek gave the signal for retreat. Out of all the regiment, there were some 10 of us left. Not one of us surrendered. It was during the retreat that I got a bullet in the leg. "They say that Shmuel's Bitkover," began one of the listeners. "Did I know Shmuel's Bitkover? Ha ha ha! There was an angel for you," interrupted the old man. "Why, when the Cossacks entered Praga, they made such a massacre. Heaven protect us and deliver us. If it hadn't been for Shmuel's Bitkover, who knows whether a Jew would have been left alive in Praga? He sent out couriers, Reb Shmuel, I mean, and announced that every Cossack would receive a silver ruble for every dead Jew, and for every living Jew a 5-ruble gold piece. So you understand that they brought him more living Jews." The old man was silent, and then, out of habit, felt for his crutch. He sighed and bowed his head. "And what became of Berek?" asked Samuel. "Did he remain in Poland?" "He would have been a fool to do so," said the old man, smiling. "That self-same day he left the country. Why, if he had remained in Praga a moment longer, they would have strung him up. It was all planned down to the smallest detail. And behind it all, you know, there were men of brains." "But he did return. I mean Berek," interrupted an elderly Hasid. "Take your time, uncle," said the old man, motioning the man to hold his tongue. "Don't catch your fish before you spread the net. What was I about to tell you? Yes! For a while nothing was heard of him. Of Berek, I mean. As if he had been drowned. Later, people said that he had become Napoleon's adjutant, was capturing one country after another, and everybody, even the Christians, believed that he would recapture Poland. And now, gentlemen, let us forget Berek and return to my foot. You may listen to the whole story. I lay in the hospital for a good part of the winter. The wound festered and festered, and there was no improvement. In short, why should I drag out the tale? They amputated my foot from the ankle. I don't have to tell you what suffering I went through. There I was, a cripple, not a groschen to my name, and here was Passover coming around. There was nothing else to do but take a wallet and go begging. But there's a God in heaven, who sends the healing before the wound is inflicted. The very day that I was supposed to leave the hospital, in came an absolute stranger, asked my name, left me with a purse of some 200 gulden, and before you could look around he was gone. Later I learned that a Jewish magnate had sent the sum to every Jew of Berek's regiment who had been left alive. In those years, understand, 200 gulden was a fortune, and surely enough, they were soon trying to match me off with a girl from Kotsk, with Shloime, the bathman's youngest daughter. In short, why drag it out? I married her. After the marriage, my father-in-law, who is a smart fellow, says to me, "Simma, if you'll take my advice, you'll become a barber. If a stranger can make a living at it, certainly you should be able to. A little shearing, a little bleeding. No worry, with God's help you'll do a good business. In those days, understand, every man of standing had his hair cut once a month, and was bled at the same time. The whole pleasure cost a trifle. In short, I've forgotten what I was talking about. Where was I? So I became a barber. During the early days, I had a hard time of it. Our children, may you be spared that misfortune, didn't live. But that's not my point. To make a long story short, things didn't happen as fast as I tell them. Once I was sent for by someone beyond Lukov, some village there. A renter had suffered a shock and would have nobody bleed him save me. At that time it was a difficult journey. Kotsk, understand, belonged to the Austrians, and Lukov to the Russians. Such a journey, in fact, meant that you took your life in your hands. But I wasn't afraid. I knew that nobody would harm me, a cripple. In short, I bled the fellow. He improved. And as I was leaving the town, whom should I meet but Berek? He hadn't changed a bit. The same mustaches, the same cut on his forehead. He had a different hat. That was all, a bearskin fur cap. I jumped down from my wagon, shouldered my crutch as in the good old days, brought my hand to my peak in salute, greeted him as Colonel So-and-so with his full title. What shall I say? You won't believe me. He embraced me and tears came to his eyes. He asked how I was doing and reminded me how we lay behind the redoubt. He simply wouldn't let me go. I had to accept a drink from him, and I give you my word that if he had told me then there that he needed me, I'd have left my wife and children and joined him. Before we separated, I said to him, "Colonel, the Austrian Uhlans are pressing us hard." And he answered, "Have patience. We'll soon have Poland back again." Who could have dreamt at that time that such a sorry end was in store for him? In short, I don't know to this day just how it all befell. I believe that the enemy must have outwitted him, and the moment he marched into the marketplace with his few soldiers, they blocked the turnpike and opened fire directly. As for retreating, you understand that was out of the question. It was a devil of a fix, so he started to hack his way out with his sword. Jewish storekeepers who happened to be on the marketplace told me that he sliced off heads the way you slice off cabbage. And if his horse hadn't fallen under him, he would have come through safely. And do you know what? There on his feet he defended himself, clutching his sword tightly, till the Uhlan stole up behind him and laid him low with a pike blow over the head. And when Berek lay at last in a pool of blood, the Uhlans took their vengeance and cut him into strips. Soon a Polish detachment came up, routed the Austrians out of Kotsk, and buried Berek with full military honors at the very entrance of the city. Here we are, at the very grave. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.